Welcome to the JBJ Management Podcast. And today our guest is Katrice Hardy, who I'm excited to have her here. She's I want to call her, you're the man. You're the man. But, there's this black girl magic thing that's going on now.
That's
and
right.
so the man has been replaced by black girl magic. Thank you for being here, first of all.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with you, Willis.
Let me ask you, how's the job? Is it what you thought it was when you said yes to the Dallas Morning News? Is it what you thought it was going to be?
So I'll start off by saying I do it all over again.
Oh,
And here's why.
good.
We are in this just thriving community that deserves an amazing local news organization that is covering so many aspects of this community that are positive, as well as areas that we can improve. I think every single one of us in the newsroom, across the company, and in this community wants Dallas to be the top of the list for everything you can think of. And so we want to make sure that the journalism we're doing can help foster those kinds of conversations and push the right people to think about the next steps to do that in areas where we're struggling. So absolutely, I'm happy to be here. And also I'm happy to be here because of our business model. I mean, we have a family that's owned our company for a long time. Many other local news organizations are owned by hedge funds. So the staffs are declining significantly. Just this week, we had announcements from other news organizations and nonprofits that are laying off. We're hiring.
In an industry that is dwindling, but you're hiring.
We're hiring. And that's because of, again, the local ownership, the way our board is structured, and also because of the talented journalists we have. We have 170 journalists that are devoted to covering DFW. We're bigger than Houston, our news organization. We're one of the biggest newsrooms in the country.
Did you ever think when you were 8, 9, 10, I would be in command of 170 people in one of the largest cities in America, determining what people think?
Absolutely not.
So when did that light bulb go off?
I was always a little girl who loved to read. And if you think about this, I used to get in trouble because I stayed up too late at night under the covers reading books. I was drawn to good storytelling. And I remember my earliest recollection of thinking about journalism as a career was when I was in middle school. And I remember watching, ironically, Dan Rather, of all people, on the news one night, 6 o'clock show, right? He would always end his newscast with some story about a small community that I'd never heard of, but it was always a hero doing something to help others, or a town that had helped their community succeed. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do with my career, but I want to do it in a way that reflects people who look like me, who have experiences like me, and who need to have their positive stories told.
I will say I have become an advocate.
What? That's a change. That's a huge change. Are you saying that because I'm here today?
No, because I'm pretty direct.
Yes, you are.
And I'm at an age where
Doesn't matter.
No, it is what it is. But I've seen a change in the Dallas Morning News, and so I know some of the efforts that you were talking about. My wife, when I first started dating her, I hold on to this phrase. And this thought. She says, "I'm gonna watch your feet, not your lips." Now, don't you think about that?
That's a powerful statement.
I'm just telling you. And so I'm watching what the morning news is doing, not what the morning news says it's going to do. How has that been for you to make this change?
So I'll say this. I think I was lucky that I walked into a newsroom with a lot of talented people who wanted to tell these stories. And they just needed someone to help encourage them to go out and do it. And some of these stories were being told. Were they being told as frequently as we wanted? Maybe not. Were we getting out in communities we hadn't been before? Sometimes I would say that was true. But having someone believe in them and telling them, this is our mission. Our mission continues to be to foster, to help the community through our journalism get stronger and better. And that means we cover everyone in the community because everyone has contributed to this community's success.
Dallas, you mentioned earlier, your organization is larger than Houston. Houston is a bigger city,
absolutely,
per se, but the Dallas-Fort Worth area,
burgeoning.
Does that mean that there's a rebirth of the Dallas Morning News and of the information industry?
I think that's definitely true. I mean, obviously, we're all consuming news in different ways. The fact that you and I are sitting here having a podcast conversation,
right?
Like, we didn't do that when I started in the business.
No, not at all.
We didn't use our phones to look at stories that may have been, and when I say a push notification, we're letting you know, hey, here's something you should read by text message right away if you subscribe to that for us. We're consuming. We know you're consuming information on different platforms, and we have to be present on different platforms. And so I think, when I think about where we're headed, absolutely, this entire area is growing. What we're seeing take place in Frisco, what we're seeing take place in Fort Worth, what we're seeing happening in Dallas is really important. And so we think a lot about which subjects and topics should we expand into, which communities do we not just need someone or two people maybe thinking about and maybe making connections with, but need to spend all of their time, full time in those communities. Mm-hmm. And so I can tell you, absolutely, we now have a faith writer, a full-time faith writer. We now have a full-time transportation writer. That's an example of just two positions we didn't have when I got here. We now have two full-time reporters that are focused on Collin County. So we're definitely listening to the community. Where we want to go, we are actually advertising very soon for an energy and natural resources reporter, because when you think about the growth, but you think about our power grid and the water challenges we're going to have with all these people moving here, we need a reporter focused on that. Workforce development is another reporter position that we're going to expand into and we're going to start advertising for soon. So we're constantly thinking about what are the needs of DFW and where do we need to provide that information? How can we provide that information with our resources?
And you've been working on getting non-believers to come over.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got to prove every day that we're worth your time, but also you've got to believe and trust in us. And to do that, we do it by being present, not for a story per se, but because we want to hear what's happening and reflect what's happening in our community for the betterment of our community. That's very important. So we encourage reporters all the time, photographers, just go and be present. Might not be for anything you're going to write today, but it's definitely going to help down the road offer the perspective you need to understand what's happening here.
Has the culture of a reporter changed? And so I have a long question for this. Years ago, when I was on the radio, I would go to the Super Bowl. I had a media pass, and my media pass, because I was the electronic media, my media pass was at the very top of the stadium, where you needed double binoculars just to see what the game looked like. But if you were a newspaper reporter, you sat in the press box where food was served. And they just treated newspaper reporters differently. So because the industry has changed now, because anybody can have a microphone and it's digital and it's pronto, has the culture of reporting and the reporters, have they changed?
I think so. And I'm thinking back when I started my career, and obviously I spent roughly 12 years of my career as a reporter. I covered different beats and topics. And I think about today, what reporters are experiencing, what they're expected to do. Absolutely, because they have to be the eyes and ears all the time. It's not as if they can show up and, if it's a breaking story, say if you're covering a Mavericks playoff game, for example, you can't just report and, like you mentioned, eat the food maybe at the press box and then think I'm going to turn in something maybe a couple hours after the game. Absolutely not. You've got to be tweeting during the game. sending in short takes of what's happening. Our photographers are constantly sending in pictures and videos that we're putting online. We're putting them on Facebook. We're putting them on LinkedIn. I mean, there's so many more platforms. And as a result, I think reporters have to really be thinking critically about how they're going to invest their time and how they're going to tell the story for all the different audiences involved. I mean, the way I tell a story for you as a business owner might be very different than the way I would tell that story maybe to a neighbor up the street who doesn't quite understand what I do. So they have to think about, how do I communicate this in different ways so that people can understand and see that I've really tried to meet them where they are.
Do you think that, what do you see in 20 years, not just for the morning news, but for the industry?
So I definitely think there's going to be a need always for our entire communities, no matter where we live, to know what's happening. You need news entities. But do I think we're going to actually be delivering the news in the same platforms we are today? No, just by nature of most of us didn't even know what a podcast was years ago, right? And so we have to keep thinking about how we can utilize different platforms, new technologies to serve our community. I didn't think that I would actually, have stories that went online when I first started reporting. It was just a print product. I got into print, guess what? Because I didn't want people to know anything other than my name. Didn't want you to know what I look like. Didn't want to be on television for that reason. And now we're all present because of social media.
The National Association of Black Journalists had a convention
In Chicago recently. Got some headlines.
I've been to the NABJ several years. What was your take? I don't want to get you in trouble. What was your take on former President Trump's responses to the reporter at the NABJ?
So I think here's the thing. We've covered politicians forever. That is by nature what a news institution does. And so we have to understand that going into these situations, some of them are going to answer your questions, some are not. Some are going to appear antagonistic. Some are going to be more open-minded about your questioning. Others are not. Some are going to feel as if you're being too critical of them. That, honestly, everybody we cover has those thoughts and responses to us similar to what Trump or Harris or anybody that might respond to us. And so what we saw was, frankly, a presidential candidate who, frankly, was responding to us similarly to the way that he's responded to us for years. Not unlike, frankly, some other presidential candidates or presidents. If you think about it, the media generally has had, I would call it a trying relationship with elected officials by nature of what we do. We're shining a light on what they're doing. We're asking critical questions. Not a lot of people can respond to that well.
So to that point, I typically tell our team here, I don't want to be in the paper.
Interesting.
I don't.
You're not in mind that all media coverage is good media coverage?
So yes, and so I had my former owner at Service Broadcasting at KKDA. He said that. Did they get the call letters right? It didn't really matter what the story was. Did they get the call letters right? Well, I don't know if that still holds up. Do people want to be in the paper for a negative feel? Or has the paper changed of, I got you? Because what I've heard you say in this podcast, we're looking for good stories.
Absolutely.
So maybe it's not bad to be in the paper.
Here's what I'll say to that. Our job is to, again, let's go back to our mission, to inspire community connection and change as North Texas' most trusted and indispensable source of news. That means we write about what's remarkable about this community. That's just as important as shining a light on how we can be stronger as a community. Because if we can write about that as well, hopefully many of the remarkable people who live here will step in and say, here's how I can help solve that problem, so that potentially my child will stay here as opposed to moving somewhere else because they don't see where they can succeed in this area. So our job is to do both. I recognize that sometimes people don't like the fact that maybe we're calling attention to something that needs to improve.
No, we
but
don't.
as long as we're doing it, here's what I'll say. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be objective. And so that story should not just include maybe how we could be better, but why it got to be that way. So it could be some policy that's been in place for 30 years that's out of maybe the people who are running things control. As long as we can look into why and make sure that we're taking every step we can to talk to all the people involved in that decision-making process, then we've done our job. And again, it's not to embarrass someone. That is not our goal. It is not to make someone feel bad. It's to make sure at the end of the day that our community is stronger and, frankly, the best in the country at whatever that topic is about. There's a very different, it's not gotcha journalism. It's journalism to make our community better. They're two different approaches. And that's how we approach our work.
Well, so I can recall when my oldest son was playing football at high school and at the University of Texas. I have a scrapbook of all the articles that was written about him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have 4 large scrapbooks from the time he was in the 10th grade until the time he was a senior, because it was all pretty. Even when they said, I don't know why he dropped that ball, he shouldn't have said. So, I mean, but still,
right.
Generally speaking, people want to see positive things in the paper.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. If the Dallas Morning News wasn't here, because we have more high school reporters, let's just talk about that, for example, today than we had 3 years ago. If we don't do that, who is?
It won't happen.
Absolutely.
There's a thing going on now, and we opened this podcast with it. I said, you are the man, but you replace the man. There's a black woman basically at the head of the Dallas Morning News. There's a potentially real good possibility that a black woman will lead the city of Dallas. There's the possibility that a black woman could be president of the United States. I hear this black girl magic. What is
Yes.
that? And where do black men fit in the culture of black girl magic?
That's a great question. So for so long, as you know, and actually you and I have been talking about this, but I have personally struggled with the fact that every time I got a role like this one of the first things mentioned in a news story was the fact that I was the first African-American and/or first woman or both. And I always wanted those stories to say, so-and-so is now the editor of whatever it might be, whatever institution we're talking about. Here's who she is, and she happens to be. But I recognize that because there hasn't been a lot of people who look like me or black men in these positions, I recognize the power in that statement for people. So to me, Black Girl Magic is about we're finally getting positions and opportunities that we had been denied in the past, that we were passed over, and not because of our talent or our skills,
Right.
because the door just wasn't open to us and we weren't in the inner circle to be evaluated properly or to be even listened to compete, right? Many people get positions because of the folks who are hiring them. They're comfortable with those people. Well, you're not going to be as comfortable with someone who doesn't look like you, and definitely maybe if you're not the same sex. So where black men fit in, we have a lot of the same similarities and commonalities. We have a lot of the same struggles. We've been denied in some cases. We've been passed over in some cases. I think to me, it's a partnership that we have to uplift one another, see one another. And so while I would say that Barack Obama happened to be the first black male president in this country,
Right.
that's also sad to me. how many years has this country been around?
And he was, what, 45?
So I would hope that we each uplift one another because we walk the same walk in life with the same challenges.
And I wonder, because that could be an unspoken battle that's going on in our community between the black man and the black woman. And it could be a divisive kind of thing if we're not aware of what's happening.
Absolutely.
So I ask you, what did the industry look like for the next 20 years? What does that mean for you personally?
Personally, it means that, this is home for me. My daughter is in high school here. She starts 10th grade next week. And I'm scared and excited all at the same time. But, I'm from, and I know I'm not from, 10 miles up the street, but I'm from Louisiana. So I like to say in the country way, right up the street. So DFW is the largest place I've ever lived in. It's a place that I personally feel is a great fit for me and my family. There's nothing that you can experience here. There's also nowhere that I can't go if I want to get there fast, 2 airports. And there's just a lot to offer and provide. And it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, to help people see and understand what local journalism can do for the community.
Do you feel that? Do you feel the responsibility that your decision determines what people think of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because you are basically the eyes to the community, to the country?
Every single day, we feel the weight of what we write about, what we don't write about, how we reflect and characterize and describe the community could have far-reaching implications on our future. We take that very seriously, and we want to be really good community stewards of what that means.
Catrice Hardy, you're the man.
Thank you, Willis.
Catrice is our guest today on the JBJ Management Podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.